One of the greatest chapters in the Bible on sexual sin that gives us the most amount of insight is Genesis chapter 19. Now, if you don't know what happens in Genesis 19, you've probably heard the name Sodom and Gomorrah. So Sodom and Gomorrah, they were these two cities that were ruled over by one country, and they had various little suburbs in between them. And so it was basically like a city-state that had two major cities, Sodom and Gomorrah. And in Sodom and Gomorrah, there were many, many, many people given over to sexual sin. And due to the amount of perversion and sickness going on in this country, God rained fire and brimstone from heaven onto the earth to destroy this city. And to this day, Sodom's still there and nothing grows there. There's just pillars of salt. The land is totally infertile. It's destroyed. No one can really live there anymore. So there's a real location attributed as being Sodom and Gomorrah. Of course, we don't know for sure, but I believe that it is Sodom and Gomorrah. You guys can do your own personal research on this. The reason I want to read this chapter is because apart from it just being kind of like a badass story, it's a story that everyone kind of remembers. Everyone knows the story, how God rained fire and brimstone upon Sodom and Gomorrah. It gives you a lot of insight into where the sin of lust, where sexual sin comes from. And a lot of people, because, number one, they're unsaved, and number two, they're like listening to false teachers. They read this story and they totally miss the deeper point that's being made here. These stories in the Bible are not just there to document historical events. There's a purpose for this story. But you have these false teachers, they totally miss the purpose of this story because they have this erroneous belief of reprobate doctrine where the reason why people are homosexuals is because they're cursed by God. And that's not what the Bible teaches. The Bible teaches something that's a lot more helpful and practical, and it teaches it primarily in this chapter. The story really begins in chapter 18 of Genesis. Abraham, is the father of our faith, he is told by God that God is going to destroy the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. And Abraham prays to God that if there's at least 5 righteous people in the city, that God would spare the city. Now, the reason he prays this is because Abraham's nephew, Lot, and his nephew's family live in the city of Sodom. They moved away from his house because he was raising Lot and moved out into Sodom. Okay? And so, God promises Abraham that he will spare the righteous people that live in Sodom and in Gomorrah. So he sends 2 angels into Sodom. And if you read Genesis 18, it's kind of implied that these 2 angels might not just be angels, but might be, 2 of the 3 persons of the Trinity. But that's neither here nor there. Well, I'll just say they're angels. It says, "And there came 2 angels to Sodom that evening, and Lot sat in the gate of Sodom. And Lot, seeing them, rose up to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face towards the ground. And he said, Behold now, my lords, turn in, I pray you, into your servant's house, and tarry all night, and wash your feet, and ye shall rise up early, and go on your ways." So these 2 angels show up. Lot is aware that these are angels, and he says, come into my house. He wants them to get up off the street. But they say, "Nay, but we will abide in the street all night." And he pressed upon them greatly, and they turned in on them. So he really wants them to come in and get off the street. And that's because the streets in Sodom are not exactly safe at night. And they entered into his house, and he made them a feast, and did bake unleavened bread, and they did eat. But before they lay down, the men of the city, even the men of Sodom, compassed the house round, both old and young, all the people from every quarter. Now, something to note here is it doesn't just say all the men, but it says all the people from every quarter. Now, that's something to note that most people don't mention when they talk about the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. See, most people think that in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, it's just talking about male humans. But if we look right here, it says all the people. And the word men also doesn't just refer to male humans, it refers to all of mankind. So there were women here, there were children here, there were all different kinds of people, young and old, small and great, gathered together in front of Lot's house. And they called unto Lot and said unto him, Where are the men which came into thee this night? Bring them out unto us, that we may know them. The term know them is a euphemism for sex, which is used in the Bible. Like, for example, Adam knew his wife when he laid with his wife and conceived Abel, conceived Cain, conceived Seth. Essentially, they're threatening to commit an act of sexual sin against these two angels which came in to Lot. And Lot went out the door unto them and shut the door after him. So he goes out to confront all of the men of the city directly. And he says, I pray you, brethren, do not so wickedly. So he's telling them, you guys are committing a sin right now. You guys don't need to be sinning. You don't need to be committing this sin. God might judge you. He's vexed his own spirit because he sees their sin. And you might think, hey, this guy Lot's pretty good, until he says, Behold now, I have 2 daughters which have not known man. Let me, I pray you, bring them out to you, and do ye unto them as is good in your eyes. Only unto these men do nothing, for therefore they came under the shadow of my roof. He offers up his 2 daughters to these men and women to be ultimately. That's what he's doing. That's pretty wicked. Now, it's already interesting to think, Lot was not raised as a sodomite. Lot was not raised in their sick and perverse culture, right? Lot was just like Abram or Abraham. He's a Hebrew, right? He worshiped Jehovah. He worshiped God. He was a righteous man. But being in this city had perverted his mind so much that he was willing to do something so sick as that. Let's keep reading. And they said, Stand back. And they said again, This one fellow came in to sojourn, and he will needs be a judge. Now will we deal worse with thee than with them. And they pressed sore upon the man, even Lot, and came near to break the door. They basically started saying, Who are you to judge us? Which is what every person in sexual sin, it's what the LGTB people do. They say, God said judge not. God said judge not. And they're doing the same thing to Lot. They're saying, Who are you to judge us? You're just some foreigner. But the men put forth their hand and pulled Lot into the house, the 2 angels, pulled Lot into the house and shut the door. And they smote the men that were at the door of the house with blindness, both small and great, so that they wearied themselves to find the door. So these angels, they curse these people with a curse of blindness so that they can't see anymore. And the men said to Lot, these 2 angels, Hast thou here any besides, son-in-law and thy sons and thy daughters, and whatsoever thou hast in the city, bring them out of this place. For we will destroy this place, because the cry of them is waxing great before the face of the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it. So this place had become so wicked and so evil that they want to destroy it, but they're going to save Lot and his family, because they're not as corrupt as the Sodomites. Now, they're still pretty corrupt. Lot offered up his own daughters to be given over to these perverted freaks. But they're not as corrupt as the Sodomites. And Lot went out and spake unto his sons-in-law, which married his daughters, and said, Up, get you out of this place, for the Lord will destroy this city. But he seemed as one that mocked unto his sons-in-law. So they didn't believe him. They said, oh, there's no way the city's going to be destroyed. You tell me the two angels came and spoke to you? And when the morning arose, then the angels hastened Lot, saying, Arise, take thy wife and thy two daughters which are here, lest thou be consumed in the iniquity of the city. And while he lingered, the men laid hold upon his hand, and upon the hand of his wife, and upon the hands of his two daughters. And the Lord, being merciful unto him, they brought him forth and set him without the city. He didn't want to leave. He wanted to stay here amongst all these, wicked, evil people. But he's like, oh, come on, my whole life is here. How can I disfellowship with these sinful people? I'm going to lose out on my money. I'm going to lose my house. I'm going to be homeless, So he didn't want to leave. And, I'm sure that many people who are watching this, including myself, can relate to that. You have your own fleshly, carnal desires, worries about your own fleshly, physical safety that keep you from, doing what's right, And it came to pass, when they had brought them forth abroad, that they said, Escape for thy life, and look not behind thee, neither stay thou in all the plain. Escape to the mountain, lest thou be consumed. And Lot said, Oh, not so, Lord. Behold now, thy servant hath found grace in thy sight, and thou hast magnified thy mercy, which thou hast showed unto me in saving my life. And I cannot escape into the mountain, lest some evil take me and I die. He's just doubting God. He doesn't believe God's going to protect him, because he's still just in his flesh. He's carnal. Living in this city has made him an incredibly carnal person. Living amongst these sodomites, amongst these sinners, has made him incredibly carnal. And it's like God just sent you two angels to your house. And it's like, oh no, God can't protect you though from dying while you're walking up a mountain, hiking up a mountain. But this is what happens. Behold now, says Lot, the city is near to flee unto, and is a little one. Oh, let me escape thither. Is it not a little one, and my soul shall live? He said unto them, See, I have accepted thee concerning this thing, that I will not overthrow the city, for which thou hast spoken. Haste thee, for I cannot do anything till thou be come thither. Therefore, the name of this city was called Zoar. God says, I'm not going to overthrow the city. I'm going to protect this city and protect your family, and you guys can hide out in the city of Zoar. The sun was risen upon the earth when Lot entered into Zoar, and the Lord rained upon Sodom and Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And he overthrew those cities, and all the plain, and all the inhabitants of the cities that grew up upon the ground. But his wife looked back from behind him, and she became a pillar of salt. His wife ends up dying because she just can't let go of her connections to these sinful people. Just like how Lot was going to just stay there, and his sons-in-laws did stay there until the city was destroyed. Now after this, it talks a little bit about Abraham, and it talks about all the things that were going on with Abraham. And then it comes back to Lot, right? And it says, And Lot went up out of Zoar, and dwelt in the mountain, and his two daughters with him. For he feared to dwell in Zoar, and he dwelt in a cave, he and his two daughters. And the firstborn said unto the younger, Our father is old, and there is not a man in the earth come in unto us after the manner of all the earth. So they're sitting here saying, literally, they're saying, there's no man to have sex with us. After they just saw a city get destroyed by sexual perversion, they're still just, their mind is polluted by sex. Then this older daughter says to the younger daughter, "Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, that we may preserve the seed of our father." So they're going to drug their father and sleep with their own father, commit incest with their own father. And they made their father drink wine that night, and the firstborn went in and lay with her father, and he perceived not when she lay down, nor when she arose. And it came to pass on the morrow that the firstborn said unto the younger, "Behold, I lay yesternight with my father, let us make him drink wine this night also, and go thou in and lie with him, that we may preserve the seed of our father." And this is sick. So now she's taking pleasure in others who commit the same sins, which are worthy of death. And she's instigating her sister to commit the same disgusting, perverse sin that she committed. And they made their father drink wine that night also. And the younger arose and lay with him. And he perceived not when she lay down, nor when she arose. Thus were both the daughters of Lot with child by their father. Now, this is a pretty dark story. The Bible's full of a lot of dark stories. And a lot of people, they wonder, why? Why do these absolutely just disturbing stories exist in the Bible? Why is this here? What is the purpose of this story? Well, just like Paul said in Romans, I believe it's Romans chapter 4, about Abraham's story, it was not just written for Abraham's sake, but for us also. What we see here is we see how a man who was otherwise righteous and innocent. Now, obviously, there's no man without sin, but compared to these Sodomites, he comes from a righteous culture. He was raised by Abraham, who was one of the most righteous men on the earth at the time. Maybe not the most, okay, he had his own problems, but he was a pretty righteous guy, right? And then he moves to this city, and he gets corrupted, and his family gets corrupted. His daughters grow up in this city, and they get their minds corrupted. And Lot is willing to give over his daughters to be raped. Lot wants to live amongst these sinful people. He doesn't want to give up his home. And Lot's daughters end up committing the sin of incest. And you got to ask, why is this happening? Because they were corrupted by the other people sinning around them, and more than likely sinning against them themselves. Why is it that Lot thought that it was acceptable for him to give over his daughters? Why did his daughters have this sick, perverse thought in their mind that it would be okay for them to lay with their own father? Well, the reason why is because they spent their life surrounded by sodomites, surrounded by perverse, disgusting people who committed perverse and disgusting sins. For all we know, Lot's daughters had known a man, not willingly, and who's to say in a city like Sodom if something like that was happening or not? If you guys catch my drift. I'm sure if they're willing to just rape two random men, why wouldn't they do the same kind of things to children? Ultimately, what you learn from the story of Sodom and Gomorrah that most people miss out on because of their own false doctrines or just being unsaved. What they miss on is it tells us where sexual sin comes from. What causes people to fall into these kinds of sin? And the answer, which the Bible is giving here, is it's learned. We are influenced by people around us. And the people around us cause us to have thoughts which we would not otherwise have. They bring ideas to our mind which would not naturally come out of our own chain of thought. And they do things to us and train us to think in ways which are not natural to our mind. The fact is that the world, the adults of the world, are failing the children of the world and neglecting and abusing the children of the world, just like Lot, because they're too invested in themselves and what they want and what feels comfortable for them.